Recognize the Democratic Whip.
Are we in a quorum call?
Here we are.
Ask unanimous consent to be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, over the weekend, while most of the country slept, a gunman targeted 2 Minnesota state legislators in their homes. He pretended to be a police officer, and he gunned down Democratic state legislator John Hoffman and his wife. Fortunately, they survived and are recovering from surgery and reportedly in stable condition. We pray for State Senator Hoffman and his wife's full recovery. Then the gunman attacked another Democratic state legislator with over 20 years of service, Minnesota Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark. She and her husband leave behind 2 children. These killings are not only horrifying for Minnesota, but a tragedy for America. This heinous act of political violence defies American values and democracy. Unfortunately, we've seen a disturbing increase in political violence in recent years, seemingly as part of a misguided and sickening attempt to strike fear and intimidation in the hearts of the American people and those who are engaged in public service. Violence and hate have no place in America. Leaders on both sides of the aisle must speak out and condemn these violent acts. I've said this repeatedly, it bears repeating. Political violence from the right or the left is never, never acceptable and is never the answer. We must condemn these violent acts when they happen, but we also must speak out against the radical language we see online and even language coming from our colleagues. One member of this body tweeted a picture of the Minnesota shooter and wrote, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way." End of quote. He tweeted another picture of the shooter and wrote, "Nightmare on Waltz Street," apparently an attempt to blame Minnesota Governor Tim Walz for the shooting. Another one of my colleagues from the other side of the aisle tweeted around the shooting, quote, "The degree to which the extreme left has become radical, violent, and intolerant is stunning and terrifying." To attempt to politicize this tragedy is absolutely unacceptable. This rhetoric from elected officials is beyond dangerous and incites even more violence. It is reprehensible and it must be called out on both sides of the aisle, because in the land of the free and the home of the brave, everyone should feel expressing their political views, and we must never do so in a way that condones violence or intimidation. I pray for Minnesota during this heartbreaking time and vow to continue to denounce and combat political violence of any kind.
Second, I'd like to take a moment and step back and share a quick word on the events of this weekend, the good and the bad alike. On one hand, this weekend we witnessed one of the largest peaceful demonstrations in American history. Nearly 5 million Americans took to the streets and made their voices heard against the rise of authoritarianism on our shores. I was proud to be one of them. We gathered in the streets, we gathered in front of state capitals, we gathered on beaches and in national parks and in cities and towns, big and small alike. For the most part, the demonstrations were peaceful. In some cities, there were acts of unlawful disruption, and those who broke the law should be held accountable. I've always been clear that the right to free speech is fundamental but must be exercised peacefully. But again, for the most part, the millions who marched this weekend did so peacefully. In many cities, there wasn't a single incidence of law-breaking. In fact, the demonstrations were much more than just simply peaceful. They're inspiring. After all the attacks we have seen this year against our institutions and our values, it is so comforting to know that the roots of democracy run deep in this country. And even though we may disagree fiercely, the marches remind us we can stand up for our country and our democracy while still keeping the peace. What happened in Minnesota, however, should be a warning. Political violence is not just on the rise in America, it's becoming all too normal. And it falls on all of us to stop it. When lawmakers are shot in their own home, when a governor's mansion is set ablaze, when the spouse of the Speaker of the House is nearly beat to death, when a violent mob storms the U.S. Capitol, and when a gunman tries to assassinate the President of the United States, it is not enough to just condemn these acts and move on. We need to recognize something needs to change. Condemning violence is only the first step, necessary, but a first step. We must all work together to address violence's root causes. We must take a serious look at the toxic forces that are radicalizing too many Americans into embracing violence. Most of all, when violence strikes, the answer is for us to come together regardless of party. That's especially important for U.S. senators. Sadly, we didn't see that this weekend. I wish I didn't have to say this, but I was deeply disappointed and sickened to see a member of this chamber use the tragedy in Minnesota to take cheap political shots at the other side on social media and risk escalating a perilous moment. When the senior senator from Utah posted what the senior senator from Utah posted after the shooting was reckless and beneath the dignity of his office. For a senator to fan the flames of division with falsities while the killer was still on the loose is deeply irresponsible. He should take down his post immediately and apologize to the families of the victims. And this isn't even about politics. This is about simple human decency. Our divisions run deep, but we are still all Americans. We may disagree sometimes, many times, maybe most of the time, but we're still human beings. The victims this weekend, no matter what party they belong to, still leave behind kids who now will never speak to their parents ever again. So I say to my colleagues, now is the time to speak with moral clarity. Every single one of us must condemn political violence, no matter where it comes from, and to work together to eradicate its root causes. We cannot be silent, because silence only serves to enable more violence. And in the meantime, I will continue to work with Leader Thune, with the Capitol Police, the Sergeant-at-Arms, and all my colleagues to ensure the safety of every senator and our staffs. This is a dark moment for America, but I believe firmly in my bones we will endure.
What did he have to say when you confronted him with that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't think this is a person who's used to being confronted. I don't think he's somebody who's used to being challenged, and I think he didn't quite know what to do. Approached him from a position of respect and wanting him to understand what I thought, and he didn't have that much to say. What he needs to do is he needs to apologize. I really think that he should take that post down. To indicate that somehow this was some sort of a Marxist leftist attack that causes violence is completely false. He's spreading that misinformation, and he should correct that. I didn't get any of that from him earlier this evening, but I hope that what I said sunk in, and that he, as my mother used to say, words have consequences, and his words have a ton of consequence, and he should own that.